In this video, I'm going to be showing you exactly how you can use the Save to Notion add-on for Firefox and Google Chrome to supercharge your Notion. And I'll also be comparing this to the default Notion web clipper and showing you exactly why you should stop using this and start using Save to Notion every time you want to be able to save an article into your Notion setup when you're on your desktop. And we're starting right now. The first thing we're going to do is add the Save to Notion add-on to our Firefox web browser. Now you can do this for Google Chrome as well, but for the purposes of this tutorial, I'll be showing you how to do it within the Firefox web browser. But don't worry, the process is quite similar, and I'll put an installation link down below in the description, so you can simply click on that and follow these steps. So let's go ahead and navigate to the installation page. I'm going to go ahead and type in Firefox extensions. Once we're on the extensions page, we're going to go ahead in the find and we're going to type in Save to Notion. Let's go ahead and click on that. So this is the add-on that we're going to be installing. Once you're on this page, all you have to do is click on Add to Firefox. Let's give it permissions and then click OK. Once you've clicked OK, you should see this icon appear within your web browser. This is the Save to Notion icon. So that pretty much completes the installation process for this add-on. Now let's go ahead and see it in action. So once you've installed this for the very first time on your PC and you click on the icon, you might see this window appearing. Not to worry, all you have to do is simply close Firefox and just boot it up again. So let's just quickly go ahead and do that. And now if I go and just click on the icon, you'll notice that this is the startup window that's appeared. So once you've got this window open, the next thing we need to do before we can start using the Save to Notion add-on is to be able to set it up so that it knows where within our Notion setup we want to be able to save the links and articles. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to a website or an article that I want to be able to save into my Notion setup. So let's go ahead and scroll down, see if we like an article. I'm going to select this one. So once you've landed on the web page or the article that you want to be able to save into your Notion, you simply need to navigate to the top right hand corner, click on Save to Notion icon, and within the window you'll see a couple of things. So the first one is that the main image from the article has now been imported into the small window for the add-on, and the second thing is that the title of the article has also now been imported in. But this doesn't mean that it's actually been saved into our Notion. In order to actually save it into Notion, what we need to do is click Create a Form. Now what this is doing is setting up the Save to Notion add-on so that it knows where you want that article to be saved specifically within your Notion setup. So the first thing it's going to ask us to do is determine which workspace and which database we need to be able to save this article into. Now if you've used a Notion web clipper, which is the official Notion add-on, this is the only two things that that particular add-on allows you to do, is simply determine the workspace and then the database. It doesn't give you any other customizable features that determine where within that particular database you want to be able to save the article. However, this is where Save the Notion differs massively. So in this example, I've got two different workspaces, but I actually want to save this article into my Productivity Corner workspace. So I'm just going to go ahead and select that. The next thing we need to determine is the database we want to save the article into. Now there's two ways you can do this. One is by simply typing in the name of the database if you already know it, or you can click on the drop down and then go ahead and simply find the one that you want and be able to simply click it. So in this case, I actually want to be able to select the My Links database. So I'm just going to go ahead and click that. So as you can see, there's a couple of things that have happened straight away. One is that we've now got this options section that we can also customize. And the second one is this fields section that we can also customize before we actually save this particular link. Let me just quickly run through what these mean. So within the options section, we're able to determine whether we want this to be saved as part of a template within our Notion setup. By default, this will just be set up to none. And that's because I don't actually have a template within that database. The second option is whether we want to be able to save the page content or not. So I always like to be able to save the page content because that means that I can actually read this article within my Notion setup and I don't have to go back into the website where you've got all the adverts and everything that are distracting you. So let's go ahead and click that. So that's the options section. So now let's go over the field section. So just like the name suggests, these are all the fields that are within your database in the Notion setup. Let me just quickly jump into my Notion to show you what I mean. So I've opened up my Notion app and I'm in the productivity corner workspace. Now within this workspace, I was looking at my links as the database where I wanted to be able to save the link to. So let's go ahead and click on that. Within this database, you can see that there's a number of columns that are within this database table. Name being the default one, but we've also got created, tags, and the URL. Now this is all of the fields that we're able to customize when we're saving the article using the Save to Notion add-on. So if I jump back into the web browser again, and let's go ahead and create the page and go back to the setting that we were at. Now the reason why I'm having to do this again is because before I had a chance to create the form, I actually navigated away from this page. Therefore, I'm just going to go through these steps again. So within the fields section, by default, the add-on has populated the icon, the front image, the URL, and the name of the article, which all seem quite sensible. But if I wanted to be able to add another field, which is actually within the database itself, then I can simply go ahead and click add new field. And then within that, it will give me an option to select the property. So if I clicked on that, a small window will appear and you'll see that there are some fields that are grayed out and then there are some fields that I'm able to select. The ones that are grayed out are the ones that have already been used within this table. So clearly there are two other fields that I can add, which are also part of my database tables, which is the tags and the cover. So I don't really want the cover ones. I'll just go ahead and select the tags because that is something that I want to be able to attribute to this particular article. So I'll just go ahead and click this. So that's how you can add the fields. And the same fashion, you can actually click on the 6 dots and you can simply go ahead and delete the field as well if there's a field in here that you don't actually want to be able to attribute to this particular article. On the right hand side, you'll see there's a couple of additional customization options that you can do. So for each of the fields that we've got, you can actually select from the drop down what you want the add-on to be able to bring into the article. So in this case, for instance, for the icon field, by default, it's going to bring in the website icon. For the front image, it's always going to bring in the page image, which actually makes sense to me. Similarly, for the URL field, by default, it will just bring in the page URL, which is exactly what we want. Similarly, the name field will just bring in the page title. When we get to the tags field, for instance, we can determine, if we clicked on this, it will actually give us a list of all the different tags that we have within our Notion database table. So in this case, we have 3 different tabs that we can choose from. Now, in this case, I can just go ahead and select the newspaper article because I think this is most representative of this particular article. But if I just bring your attention to these lock icons on the right hand side, what this basically says is that when I set up this particular form, I can either lock the field so that every single time I come across a link like this, it will always tag it as a newspaper article. But if I leave this as unchecked or unlocked, that means every time I try and save an article, this particular add-on will give me the option to select between the 3. So I personally prefer to use this particular option because in any given day, I might come across articles that are all 3 and I don't want to be setting up a different table every time I do that. So I normally just leave this particular field as unlocked. But there are other fields that you would naturally want to just have locked all the time because you don't want to be able to select in the drop down and have to select them every single time you save a link. So for instance, I want to be able to lock the page URL and the page title because by default, I always want the article to be picking up the URL and the title that's within the article. I'll never really want to be able to sort of customize that or be able to click in the drop down. So in that case, I've left those as locked. Now that we've customized all of these fields and we've looked at the options and we've got the right workspace and database where we want to be able to save this article to, all we have to do then is simply click on the save icon on the top right hand corner. So let's just go ahead and do that. So as soon as we've saved that, you'll notice that within your small window for the add-on, we now have a My Links, which is the name of our database, as an option for us to be able to use every time we save an article. You'll also see that there's another option now below this, which which is where we can add another form if we don't always want to be able to save the links within this particular setup. So now let's go ahead and actually save this article into our Notion setup. And the way we do that now is by simply clicking on My Links. And when you click on that, you'll see that it's populated the page image, it's got the URL by default, and it's locked, we can't change it. The name is populated, we can't change it. The only thing that we can actually change is the tags, because if you remember, that was the only field that we actually left as unlocked. So this means that I can now click on the drop down and select what type of article it is. Let's say, for instance, I've looked through this article and I want to be able to change this to be a tech article. So we can go ahead and tag that as well, or we can give it a food tag as well. So, and then we can click outside of that. So now that when we save this to Notion, it will save it with all of these 3 tags. But actually, I'll just go back to the previous setting because I think this is just a newspaper article and I want to be able to tag it as just that. Once you've got the tags as you want them, you can simply click outside of this window and then click Save to Notion. Once it's successfully saved to Notion, you'll just get this screen, and a couple of things in here you can do. One is just simply close the pop-up and you can continue to browse, or we can open it up within our Notion using the browser, or we can select this option where every time we actually click open in Notion, it will always open in the desktop app. I prefer it to be within the desktop app, so I'm just going to select this particular option, and now let's go ahead and click open in Notion. And there you go. So now it's opened up that particular link in our Notion setup. Couple of things to note. So this is what the article looks like within our Notion setup. So the icon for our page in Notion is the HBR icon. So if I go back into our website, you'll notice that this is the Harvard Business School default icon that they probably have on this website, and Notion is able to pick that up even though we can't necessarily see it by default. The page title has now become the Notion page title, which is exactly the article title that we saw. We've got the created time, the tag is the newspaper tag that we gave, so that's been pre-populated as well. And then we've also got the URL, so if we want to go back straight to that page, we can always go back to that. But in the body of the article though, I've noticed that the only thing is brought in is the featured image. It's actually not brought in the article itself. So let's head back into the article within the web browser and see how we can correct this. So I'm going to go ahead and try and save this article into Notion again. So I'll click on the Save to Notion icon. Now in this particular case, what I want to be able to do is click on this gear icon and see how I actually set up the form. So let's click on this and it will bring us back to our settings page. Okay, so as you can see, when I was saving this particular form, I actually forgot to click save the page content. So let's go ahead and check this and let's click on save. And now let's go ahead and save this to Notion again. So hopefully it should have worked this time around. Now let's open it up in Notion again. So you'll get this message within the web browser. So you can just click on always use this application to open Notion links, and we'll just give it permission. What this does is it will open up our Notion desktop app. And if I expand this time around, we've got all of the fields that we had before, but if I scroll down, it's now brought in the actual content of the article as well. And it's brought in all the different images and it's very nicely laid out. And if I go back into my database itself, which is the page above, you can see that it's got references to both the articles. One is the first one that I created, which didn't have any of the content in it. So we can go ahead and just delete this, and you'll notice we've got the other article that we've just saved, which does actually have the content in it. And we can go ahead and change the tags if we want, or we can add additional fields. But this is a much better way, because if I was using the sort of the Notion web clipper, I wouldn't be able to change the tags or any of the other fields. I'd have to just save the link and I'll have to come in here and tag them myself. So now that we've saved one link using the Save to Notion add-on into our Notion setup, let's go ahead and see how quickly we can save a few other links, just to give you an idea. So I'm back on this website. So let's say I want to go into the video section. Now let's go ahead and select this case study. And let's say I quite want to watch this video, but not at the moment. So let's just go into the Notion add-on, click on that link. You can see straight away it's picked up the picture, it's picked up the link and the name, just what we're expecting. It's giving us the option to be able to select what type of tag this is. In this case, I think this is going to be more of a tech type article. So I'm going to select that and I'm going to take the newspaper tag off. And that looks good. So let's go ahead and save it into Notion. Now let's jump into the Notion app to see what's happened. So as you can see, we've now got this second link, which has now been added on to our links database. And it's also got the tag tech associated to it. It's got the link and the name. That's exactly what we're expecting it to show us. Let's go ahead and open this up to see what is actually brought up. locked. We go into the article itself, it's got the same icon, it's got the title that we expect, it's got the tag, link, and if we scroll down, it's got the image. And because this was a video, we obviously don't have any article or sort of text that goes along with this image. So if you do want to watch the video, you'll just simply have to go and click on this link and it'll take you straight back into the video itself. Right, so let me show you one more thing with this Save to Notion add-on. So if we clicked on this, you can notice that it actually gives you a prompt if we've already saved this particular page before, which is quite handy actually, because sometimes you're kind of jumping around different articles and you're not quite sure whether you've actually saved this into your database. So to avoid the duplication, it does give you a nice little prompt to say that, you know, are you sure you want to be able to add this again into your Notion setup? In this case, we don't actually want to be able to do that. What I want to demonstrate now though is the fact that we can set up another form for a different purpose, and we can interchangeably use different types of forms to be able to save the links in different databases within our Notion setup. So now let's go ahead over into a completely different website and see what we can do. So I quite like this article, so let's go ahead and see what this is about. Right, so let's say this is an article that I want to associate with more my personal learning. So if I go into the add-on, instead of saving it by default into this particular form that I'd set up and tagging it either as a newspaper, food, or tech, I actually want to be able to go back and set up a completely new form so it saves it into a different database altogether. Now just before we do this, let me head over into my Notion setup and set up a new database table that's specifically for my reading and learning. So let me set up a new page and we'll call this reading and learning resources. Let's give this a table as well. So we'll make it into a table. Now let's set up this particular table so we can tag different elements of the reading material itself. So let's give it some tags. So we'll go ahead and create some. So one is for personal development. And then we'll create another one that simply is a checkbox to say whether we have read the article or not. And then let's create one where I just want to be able to add a short description. Right, that looks good. Now let's head back over into our web browser and try and create a form that adds links to this particular database. So we're back into the article. I'm going to go ahead and click on the add-on and let's go click back. And now we're into this section of the add-on where you can create a new form. And I'm going to select Productivity Corner Workspace. In the database this time around, I'm going to type out reading and learning resources. So that is the same database that we've just created within our Notion desktop app. And again, I'm given a couple of options. So I'm just going to go save the content. I've got those default fields again, and it's pre-populated what it thinks should be populated within those fields. I'm going to go ahead and add a couple of additional fields in this case. So let's go ahead and select the property. As you can see, there's a number of fields here that are not already part of this form. So I'm going to go ahead and do the usual tag one. I'm also going to create another one for whether I have read the article or not. And then I want to do one where I've got the short description. So that looks good. But in this case, I'm actually going to mark this. I'm going to pre-select this to personal development. And I'm actually going to lock this field. And we'll see what happens when we go to saving this particular article. And we'll go ahead and take that. So that looks good. Let's go ahead and save this. Right. So as you can see, now every time we're going to click on this add-on, we'll be given two options as to whether we want to save it within the My Links database or we want to be able to save it within the reading and learning resources. Right, so let's go ahead and select this form and save this page and this article into our Notion setup. So as you can see, it's pre-populated these fields and it's also tagged the article even though we can't necessarily see it in this page. We can mark it as read or we can add a short description. Now, the reason why you'd want to use something like this is because sometimes you actually do read the article on the website, but actually you find quite a few elements in the article are actually quite useful and you want to be able to refer back to them again. So you could give yourself a bit of a prompt to say, actually, you have read the article, but this is just for future reference, basically. So that's just a short description that I put in and I marked it as read. Now let's go ahead and save this. Now let's head back into our Notion desktop app to see what has happened into our database. So as you can see, it has now saved that link within our database. It's given us the name, which is the name of the article. It's tagged it by default as personal development, so we didn't have to keep on going and saving that particular tag. We can obviously in the database itself go ahead and tag it as a number of different things if we wanted to, but by default, because this field was locked, it will always select this as being a personal development. development one. Don't worry if you change your mind, because you can always go back into the add-on itself. Let me just demonstrate that to you. You can click on the particular form, you can click on the gear icon on the top right hand corner, and you can then just go ahead and make that tags field unlocked. And now when you go ahead and save the article, it will actually give you the option to be able to select from the drop down all the tags that we had selected within our database. We've also got the red column has been pre-checked because that's what we did, and then you've got the short description which is there. So it saves me having to just, going into the article and remembering what it was all about. I know that that's really what it was for, and it's a short description, and then that's the link to the article itself. We can obviously go into the article as well. Let me just expand the page, and as you can see, it's got all the usual stuff. It's got the icon as well, and then if I scroll down, it's got the article as we saw it within the web browser. So this particular add-on is extremely powerful and customizable. Like I said, you can create as many of these forms as you like, and then you know that within your Notion setup, because a lot of people have very complex Notion setups with various different databases for different purposes. So this will allow you to be able to very, very quickly and very specifically add those articles exactly how you want it to be able to show up, and it saves you time. So this is a really powerful add-on when you compare it to the default Notion web clipper. Let me just quickly show you what I mean. So within this particular add-on, as we've seen, you're able to customize a whole host of different things. So not only can you say what workspace and database the article needs to be, you can also change a number of these options, and you can add as many fields as you have within your database and be able to pre-populate them as you wish. So this is really powerful, and it allows you to be able to save the links very, very specifically in your Notion setup. Now, if I was to go ahead and save this same link using the Notion web clipper, which is this particular icon over here, when I click on that, you're only given a subset of the options, right? So you can only change the title, and the only other things you can change is to determine which particular workspace and which particular database you want to be able to save. Now, it doesn't give you any other options to pre-populate any of the tags, short descriptions as we've done. So if I just go ahead and click on this, and I try and save this into our reading and listening resources page, and we click save. Now, if we jump back into our Notion setup, I'll show you what I mean. So straight away, you can see a couple of differences, right? So when we use the default Notion web clipper, there's no icon that comes through. Yes, we're able to change the name, but from a tagging perspective, I have to now come back into my Notion setup and give this thing a tag manually. Equally, if I wanted to be able to mark this as read, again, I've got to do this manually when I come into my Notion setup. And similarly, if I want to be able to add a short description, I can only do it manually when I'm in my Notion page. So in terms of speed and from a productivity angle, the saved Notion add-on is definitely the one to go with, because you're able to do all of these things straight from the web browser, and then you can continue browsing and going through different articles without having to keep coming back into Notion, because more often than not, you'll actually be browsing and you'll come across quite a few different articles. You will then go ahead and save those using the web clippers into your Notion setup. But when you eventually come back into this page in Notion, you would have forgotten necessarily what the different tags were for the articles. And then if you're then having to do it again, you're basically, the only way you can then do it is be able to open up the article, read a little bit of the article so you remember what it's about, and then you can go ahead and start doing your tagging and your short descriptions and so on and so forth. Whereas it's much better to be able to do this type of tagging straight when you try and save the article, because you know what the article is about there and then, and you don't have to remember it when you come back to this page afterwards. So if you were to ask which is better when you compare the Notion web clipper, which is the official one, versus the saved Notion add-on that you get, I would 100% recommend using the saved Notion add-on, because it is so much more customizable and it gives you so much more flexibility. And as I've just shown you, from a productivity point of view, it saves you so much more time, and it allows you to be able to tag and add different fields to the article as and when you actually save it from the browser itself, and you don't even need to go back into your Notion setup. That is something that we cannot do with the default Notion web clipper, which is quite limited. Now, don't get me wrong, when we didn't have the option of the saved Notion add-on, having the web clipper was the best thing, because part of the Notion ecosystem is that you should be able to integrate with different applications, right, and be able to reference those and save those very, very quickly. Because if we didn't have either of these web clippers, what we'd have to do is simply click on these URLs, save them manually. You wouldn't really get the whole article. So having the web clippers is actually very, very powerful. So the only negative point about this particular saved Notion add-on is that you can't actually use this on your mobile. So on the mobile, you're actually still limited routed to the official Notion web clipper. So if you're browsing through articles and you want to save them through your phone, you can still only do it through the official Notion web clipper, and you won't have any of the other options around fields, and you won't have any other options to save the article other than specifying what workspace and what database it needs to be saved into. So if you are someone who relies on your mobile phone quite a lot to be able to save articles and browse through them, then unfortunately this add-on is not really going to be useful to you. But if, like me, you actually spend a lot of time on your PC and you're browsing through articles on your desktop, then I would 100% recommend using this add-on compared to the web clipper. But hopefully in the future we do get some of these add-ons on the mobile as well, so we can harness the power of these add-ons on mobile phones as well. So I hope you liked that video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions, put it in the comments below. And if there's any more type of Notion content you want me to create, then put it in the comments below as well, and I'll put that on my list of videos to create. And if you're enjoying this content, then please do hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next video.